My name is James Lee Hernandez. I rarely ever say the Lee when I introduce myself. And I'm one of the directors, executive producers, writers, editors of McMillions.
I'm Brian Lazarte, also one of the directors, executive producers, writers, and editor of McMillions.
I see this note on the desk, McDonald's, monopoly, fraud, and I go, give me that damn thing. Because I'm bored to death with this healthcare garbage, right? It's important, but I was ready to move on. It seemed like this meeting just took forever. I might have been hungry twice in that meeting.
This was Doug's opportunity to be an undercover agent.
I showed up with a gold suit on. This is like a golden fry suit.
He looks like he's a manager of a McDonald's.
But I had a white shirt on, so I thought I was safe. I wasn't. Man, undercover is awesome.
That is the trailer for the Emmy-nominated HBO documentary McMillions, and this is Factual America. We're brought to you by Alamo Pictures, a production company that makes documentaries about America for international audiences. Today we're talking about the McDonald's monopoly promotional game fraud of the 1990s and the doc that chronicles it. Joining us are the directors and executive producers, and they wear many hats on this film, James Hernandez and Brian Lazarte. James and Brian, welcome to Factual America. James, how are things with you?
Pretty good, about as good as they can be in this day and age. A lot of at home. Luckily been kept sane by my girlfriend and our dog. It's really helpful.
One of our guests is called, when I asked that, said he's COVID good. So it's an expression I've started using more often now.
Which is sort of like a lukewarm regular time.
Yeah, exactly. And Brian, how about you?
Doing great. All things considered, 2020 has been a wild year for us, and it keeps getting wilder. Even as we're finishing out December. Good. Kids are good.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of extra family time and extra sleep wherever possible.
Okay. Extra family time is important, as I've discovered and probably should have always known. Just to remind our listeners, the film, you've seen or heard the trailer, it's McMillions, came out in February on HBO. We're based here in the UK. It came out on Sky Documentaries in May, nominated for 5 primetime Emmys. The Guardian here in the UK calls it a rip-roaring romp around the McDonald's monopoly scandal, which I would heartily agree with. And so thanks again for coming onto the podcast. And as you've already alluded to, in this most ridiculous and challenging of years, this has been one hell of a ride for you this year, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite the extreme ups and downs, I'd have to say, of my entire life. We were very lucky in the sense that the world didn't shut down until literally the weekend after the last episode aired. So we still got to do the normal press run. We had to premiere at Sundance, and week to week, HBO released it in America. So by the time it was finished that next weekend, everybody was shut in. So we're very happy that people basically people held hostage to watch the show.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it's a 6-part. For those who are listeners who don't know, maybe been living under a rock. I don't know. It's a 6-part series. And maybe Brian, why don't you give us a little synopsis of what this McMillions is about?
Sure. Well, especially for us who grew up here in the States, McDonald's did this monopoly campaign back in the late 80s and all throughout the 90s, where if you played the game Monopoly, you kind of knew how the game was played. You could go and get a large French fry, a Big Mac, and you get a peel-off sticker that you would then build onto your board, and with the right number of stickers and game pieces of Monopoly, you could win various prizes. You could win a jet ski, a Sea-Doo, you could win a bicycle, a new TV, and obviously the prizes kept going up to a house, a car, or a boat, And the ultimate grand prize was the $1 million grand prize. And everyone wanted this. You know, who didn't want to go to McDonald's and get a Big Mac and win $1 million? And so there was this tremendous marketing campaign that McDonald's put out year after year. And they did this, you know, sometimes multiple times a year, multiple campaigns. And then we would see, you know, these winners come forward, you know, who won the grand prize and what they were going to do with their money. And this went on for well over a decade. And it turns out that, you know, from 1989 to 2001, almost every single winner who came forward for any high value prize turned out to be part of this criminal ring to defraud the game. And the FBI subsequently, you know, helped round up all of these criminals in this massive, you know, undercover operation. And over 53 people were indicted across 23 states. And most people don't know about the story, or at least didn't prior to us making this series. So it's a wild one.
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to talk more about that in a little bit, about how this thing just sort of flew under the radar screens for most of us. You may or may not know, but you know, they still run it here in the UK. I actually won a year's streaming for one of the local streaming services on the McDonald's Monopoly game here a couple of years ago. So and
interesting. We actually saw your name pop up in some of the federal records. So
I was wondering about that. Yeah, no, that one phone number besides Uncle Jerry's that kept coming up. There's a reason I haven't been back and haven't lived in the U.S. for a while now. But I mean, James, Brian's already alluded to this, but I do know, having listened to some other stuff you've done, you have a McDonald's background, if you will, and I mean, how big this thing was everywhere, wasn't it? I mean, it was just, you've got some great archival, obviously, of just, you know, of this game, and it just, I think it was quite amazing, even how it would like drive sales.
Oh yeah, and specifically in America, it did, as you have proven because you've won. It eventually went to other places around the world, but growing up as a kid in the '90s, this thing was massive, and every single year they would run it once a year. Then it got to the point where they'd run it twice a year, because every single time that they would run this game, McDonald's, their sales would go up 30 to 40%. I mean, that's a massive amount. It was such a popular game. And I was one of the people that was just every single time it ran trying to win it. Yeah. And then it got to the point where when I turned 16, my first job was at McDonald's during the heyday of this game. And it was one of those things where like you would trade pieces with friends. You were like, if you went on a road trip somewhere, you would stop at McDonald's in random places that you would never go, because you would think, oh, well, that's the reason I can't get that one piece I need, because I just keep going to the same McDonald's over and over again.
Right. Yeah.
So there was this massive thing, and that's why when I first heard about the story, it really called to me, because I was one of the people that was trying to win this thing, and I was just blown away that I had never heard about this, that I didn't know that there was some huge fraud ring that was taken down, which at the time when I found out about it, it had been, like 15 years, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't, we won't go too much detail, because I think it's, even for those who haven't seen it, and it is, I don't want to have spoiler alerts, even though this has been out for a while, because I think it is well worth having those little surprises while you're going through it and watching it. It's a great deal of fun, I will say. But I mean, everyone was completely unaware this was going on. This could have gone on forever. I mean, it seems like 24 million in fraud. I think, as you said, I think all but a few of the top winners were implicated in this. Do we know who provided the tip? Because it's an interesting story. It's just down to one person calling this office in Jacksonville of the FBI, isn't it?
Well, have you seen the last episode yet?
I've I haven't. I have to admit. You see,
Okay.
I'm making my way through. So you've caught me.
Well, you're just gonna
Okay.
have to keep watching.
So I'll have to keep watching. Okay, then we'll leave it at that. But then why? I mean, well, then maybe that's interesting. That's part of this as well. I mean, it ends up being this sleepy FBI office in Jacksonville. Or I not trying to offend anyone here, but I think you even say it yourself in episode 1 that it was kind of the place for retired agents to go to finish their careers. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville FBI, really covers such a large middle. It's like covers the middle district of Florida. And for those who've never been to Florida, it's a massive, massive state.
Mm.
And for those who don't read news stories about Florida, weird stuff happens in Florida all the time. And so it seems appropriate, that the FBI gets a lot of weird inquiries. But yeah, I mean, some of the agents who were there, I mean, like most people, when you get, Florida's got great climate, great weather. So who knows exactly the reasons. We can, hypothesize why a lot of those agents stayed there, and this was kind of considered the sleepy agency. But they were the smaller team, and in a lot of ways, a little bit of the the underdog in this story, and they kind of approach things in a more traditional, very by the book, old school method. And so the story is interesting on a lot of fronts because of what happened with this one particular rookie agent who was just hungry for something new. And he came in and was like, what can I do? How can I get undercover? And was always trying to find things. But, the FBI at that time was really focused on healthcare fraud. That was like a big issue. And when this story came through, or this one tip sort of, presented itself through this, FBI has like hotlines, people call in and they say like, hey, I see a suspicious package, go check it out. And they get these complaint calls, and this came through that supposedly. And this one agent, caught wind of it through his superior and was like, just on a mission, like, this sounds way more interesting than the healthcare fraud stuff that I've been doing. And just starts putting the pieces together and is like, hey, there's real substance to this. Like, and they didn't know how far back it went. I mean, this was 2001 when they caught wind of it. So they just thought like, okay, they hear the McDonald's Monopoly game is rigged, and this mysterious character by the name of Uncle Jerry, is behind it. And that's it. And they just start their investigation. And we really loved learning the procedural aspects of what they went through creatively. And then this incredible undercover operation that subsequently came about, through the creative discussions of how to crack this case.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's obviously, the film is, on the, as they say here, written on the tin, is advertised. It's about the McDonald's monopoly fraud and scandal. But I mean, just in episode 1, you learn so much about how the FBI operates and investigates these sort of things, which I found very interesting. The other thing I found interesting is you guys hit a gold mine with this group of investigators, didn't you? Because you've got, I think you're alluding to Doug Matthews, who I mean, I would describe as I was surprised to find out he was an accountant by background. He's an accountant with ADHD, I think. You've got his boss, Chris Graham. I mean, did you know you were going to, this must have been a gold mine when you walked in and started interviewing these guys. Is that right, James?
Yeah, it definitely, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Like, if we could have cast some characters to be FBI agents, this is how we would have written it. But this is real life, and that's who they really are. But the first interactions with all this whole team, it was just a shock, because you're used to thinking of FBI agents as just robots with suits on. And then the first conversation that I ever had was with Mark Deverell, the federal prosecutor. Like, wow, this guy has a good personality. And then meeting Doug and talking to him, and like, who is this guy? Like, I need to get on a plane and meet him immediately. all the way up to Chris Graham and Tom Kinnear and Janet Pellicciati and like all of these guys, this entire team. They started to learn, like, okay, well, the FBI, they're not robots. They're actually just individuals that have great training, smart people that come together and actually have to investigate. I mean, the FBI has investigation in its name, but you think that the FBI is just so powerful that they make 2 phone calls and they know everything. And it was really fascinating for Brian and I we wanted to show what it actually is like. Like, it's so different in TV shows and movies and how all this works. Of like, they get this really small kernel of information, and how do you expand that out to a huge investigation where they end up arresting 53 people? I mean, to go through the steps of all of that was just so great for us. And then they were very open and honest about how it works, about the level of teamwork that they have to use and creativity. And if you think about it, they had to investigate something on 2 different fronts. They had a proactive investigation with the crime actively happening, but then they had to go back in time and try to figure out, okay, well, how long has this been going on for? That's just a monumental thing to think about, with this happening, for 12 or 13 years. It's just staggering, especially for a small office where Jacksonville, they had a small fraction of agents compared to somewhere like Atlanta or Miami or Chicago. And it ends up that this entire office that really has to focus the workforce on figuring this out.
And James, you were already, and both of you mentioned this already, but how this all flew under the radar screen for so long. I mean, how did this project come about? How did you get the idea for doing this?
Yeah,
well,
James.
I'll take this one. So it started in 2012. I was sometimes before I go to sleep at night, I'll just lay in bed and look at Reddit and just laugh at funny cat videos or like read interesting stories. And there was a TIL. Today I learned nobody really won the McDonald's Monopoly game. And like most people, I loved that game, like I talked about earlier. And when I looked into it, it just linked to a local Jacksonville newspaper blurb from 2001 saying 8 people had been arrested, and it like lit me on fire basically. And so I just started doing all this research and really couldn't find that much. And it got to a point where it was just the same info regurgitated over and over again via different media outlets. And so I just kept looking into it over the years, over the next year and or so, and then put a Freedom of Information request in with the U.S. government. I was like, I want to know what it's all about. Yeah. And it took a little over 3 years for that to go through. And once it did, I was able to find out the names of the FBI agents and federal prosecutor that was part of it. And then reached out to them. And then once I reached out to them, they said, yeah, this is our favorite case. Nobody's ever hit us up about this before. We'd love to work with you. And at that point, I'd known Brian for a really long time. And he has a phenomenal background in documentary filmmaking. And I called him and I said, man, let's grab some lunch. I think I have something really big here.
And Brian, what did you do when James called and then you met for lunch? What did you think?
Well, if we had met at a McDonald's, it would have been a better nugget.
And do a scratch card or something, yeah.
Yeah, to the story. No, I mean, of course, just like on the surface, when you pull back the curtain on a story or on a part of your life that you remember seeing it one way for a long time, you're like, wait, I never had a chance to ever win that game. And you learn about it after the fact. You start to wonder, like, what else has been hidden from me in life? And of course, like, there's a great deal of intrigue here. Like, okay, so the FBI are part of this, investigation. They went undercover. They pretended to be a film crew to shoot a commercial for McDonald's to basically, get people telling their stories for how they won the game as a means to investigate this crime. Like, like, of course, like on the surface, that sounds fantastic. But then you got to wonder, like, okay, well, how good are the characters who can tell the story? And how big of a story is this? I mean, obviously, a lot of people were indicted as a result. Would they be willing to go on camera? Would they be willing to share their story? Is there, a lot of different veins, twists and turns that the story has that are worth venturing down? And of course, like, the moment we stepped into it in a meaningful way and started filming some stuff with the guys and started asking more and more questions, it was like, it was the, shock, hey, hang on a second. Are you like, there was all those double take moments that we had, investigating this, at that early phase, that we realized, like, this story has the legs to go well beyond just a feature documentary and could go multiple episodes into a series. And this would be such a tremendous vehicle to do that. And, that's actually, James and I were digging into this on our own for a while. And then we ultimately met up with Unrealistic Ideas, which is Mark Wahlberg, Archie Gips, Stephen Levinson's, unscripted company. And we partnered with them, and we brought it to HBO, and HBO got excited about it. And subsequently, that's how ended up with you guys, with Sky. But this is it's been a pretty incredible road to see. We thought it was amazing, other people thought it was amazing, and then we were able to get the support and funding to actually make this happen and tell this incredible story.
Okay. I want to continue that conversation, but we're going to give our listeners a little break here and a word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back with James Hernandez and Brian Lazarte.
You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Alamo Pictures to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America.
Welcome back to Factual America. I'm here with James Hernandez and Brian Lazarte, directors and executive producers, and many other hats they wore on the series McMillions, HBO, Sky Docs here in the UK. Well, Brian, we were talking to you, or whichever one of you wants to answer this, but I thought you answered a lot of questions I was going to ask, because this decision of, is it a feature? Is it a series? HBO and Unrealistic Ideas getting involved. But when did you really know you had a hit on your hands with this?
The second that we met Doug Matthews and McDonald's Monopoly Fraud. Those.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we ever necessarily thought we have a hit. We just the fun thing about doing this together with Brian was that you have basically somebody else that you can bounce things off of. And if we thought it was interesting or funny or cool, it was that was our barometer. Just whatever we personally thought we would want to watch or thought was interesting, that's what we would do. So when we were finished with it, watching the episodes, we would laugh at things, we would get emotional about things, like, okay, well, if we're doing that, then hopefully other people will respond to it. And I guess the only time I ever thought, wow, this actually might be something big, was when we premiered at Sundance Film Festival. HBO had laid out this marketing campaign, and part of it was they created a McMillion's bar, and they turned an entire bar on Main Street and Park City into a McMillions themed bar where people could win prizes and all this stuff. And when we walked into it for the first time, that might have been the time we're like, this might be bigger than I thought it was going to be.
My ship has come in.
Yeah.
Brian, I mean, how do you bring a 20-year-old scandal to life? I mean, you could do archival, you got B-roll, you get talking heads, but that alone could just be boring, I mean, how do you bring this to life and make it jump off the screen?
Oh, I mean, that's the secret sauce of filmmaking. No, I mean, we always knew that, telling a story historically has its pitfalls, and you don't want to. It's very easy to kind of fall into those tropes of it just feeling like a factual recounting of things that happened in the past. And we always wanted this to feel very cinematic and to feel very present, like we're actually living in the middle of what was the investigation. And the way that we decided very early on to approach the story was structure the series in a very particular way, where that episode 1 really came from the FBI's point of view, and we wanted the audience to really feel like they were an investigator, like they were part of that team, and that we're learning things as the FBI agents are actually learning things. And because we found that process very interesting, it's very simple to jump to like, oh, and then this person got arrested and that person got arrested. But when you're in the middle of it and you start with that seed of, if you haven't seen it, in the very first episode, Doug Matthews is just talking to his superior agent, training agent, Rick Dent, who was the senior, high-level, very experienced, he was like the poster child for the FBI. And he just had this one Post-it note on his computer that said McDonald's monopoly fraud ? And Doug sees this and is like, what is that? and just starts this conversation of like, well, how long has that been there? Like, were you even going to do anything with it? Like, has this been, were you even going to follow through with this? And he's like, can I do something with it? And it's like you're on this journey with this one rookie agent. And then, he's like trying to figure out ways to go undercover, and he's like pitching ideas, and like no one in the office wants to hear it. But then he pitches this idea of like the Publishers Clearinghouse style of undercover, where, for those who don't know in the States, maybe you guys have it there, but like Publishers Clearinghouse does this like sweepstakes where they go to your house, it's like a raffle type thing that you submit all your information, you give away your life basically to maybe win $1 million or $10 million for life. And they award the winner live on television, or at least they used to do it this way, where they show up to your door with a camera and a crew and balloons and confetti. And he pitches this style of undercover operation. And they actually get behind this. They think that this is really kind of a clever idea. And of course, he has no experience ever going undercover. And he gets this chance to do this. And we were very fortunate that we actually had the footage of the FBI going undercover. And so we knew that like, okay, we have this great archival. We want to tell the story from the FBI's point of view out of the gate. And we want to feel like we're in it. And so that was our tonal approach. And then as the series progresses, in episode 2, we start to learn from the other side, the criminals, the people who were, indicted and part of this. And we love that as we discovered these characters in the series and for ourselves, that there were a lot of layers to them, and that some people obviously knew what they were doing, but there were some people that were legitimately duped into participating and to claiming prizes, who, never ever thought that this was a federal crime that they were participating in. And we wanted to humanize, each of their experiences in a way that we could identify. And so the series evolves as we go episode to episode. And hopefully, the audience gets to go on this incredible journey along with the FBI and us, similar to like what we learned along the way. And we obviously the finale is a nice twist and turn, but we won't spoil that for you or for anyone else, I guess.
Exactly. Much appreciated. But James, whose idea was it to use reconstructions? Because I know that can be a double-edged sword sometimes and can fall flat. But I think the episodes I've seen, I think they're brilliant. And so, how did you come up with ideas for that and how to shoot those?
That was Brian and myself. There's so many great parts to the story that there just wasn't footage of. Like,
Yeah.
for example, the first time that the Jacksonville FBI office tells McDonald's about this whole situation and the pressure cooker that they described on both sides of it, of what it was like to be in that office and revealing something this big, they're just obviously we're not going to be getting any footage from inside of an FBI office in this very pivotal moment. But we wanted people to live through it. We just want it to be a flippant story that like, oh, okay, we went there, we had them come in, but like, no, you need to understand, you need to feel that pressure that they were under. I mean, you have this small office telling one of the biggest companies on the planet, there is something wrong with your most beloved game that makes you the most money. And so we started really with that. And of course, we pitched the show like that. The entire vision from the very beginning was having recreations to really let people feel and be in the moment of these pivotal stories. And HBO, they usually are not big fans of recreation, but Nancy Abraham and Lisa Heller, they really they normally don't like it, but they were very open to it. And so what we said is, look, we will cut the entire show together. We will put in storyboards to give you an idea of what the recreation will look like at this point. And once we showed them the first episode, they got it. And it was a good combination of having their mentality of not totally normally liking it, but it really made us focus more on, okay, well, we're going to shoot this in a way that does not distract the viewer from the story that's being told. There are a lot of documentaries, and it works in some of them where you can actually see an actor's face, and people are almost like giving a monologue, and we didn't want that. We already had great characters telling great stories. We just wanted to hint at, have a visual hint of what that person was talking about, so it can really bring you into the story more. And so it was a collaboration of all of us, but it was Brian and I definitely had to sell them on the idea that it could be done tastefully and would just seem cheesy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just for me personally, I really appreciated, and it must be quite a challenge because you've got the subjects, they're all alive, I guess. And yet you're having to get actors that are their younger selves. And yet what I also liked about it was, let's face it, this is the 90s, and 90s are pretty hot right now. And I remember putting Post-it notes on that monitor that looked like that, with those kind of messages and these sort of things, and the dress and everything. It's I think it captures it quite well.
Thank you. Yeah, we were really big on the idea of basically we in the middle of making a documentary series, we made a movie. We wanted to make sure that the costumes, the makeup, the hair, like everything was very much in the period of time, took you back to that. One of the coolest things was we filmed in an old office and turned it into the FBI office, but it was just wild walking around and seeing big CRT monitors with with the back on them, and clunky keyboards and big printers and all of that. It was definitely a time warp walking through that set.
Yeah. It took me back to sitting in a cubicle in the 90s in an office. I can, for good and for bad. But I mean, for both of you, what's it like being nominated for 5 Emmys? That must be exciting, but it's also in the year of COVID, so it must be very different than your usual ceremony.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for James and I, this is a tremendous accomplishment. I mean, we were not only grateful out of the gate to have the support of HBO to make this, to spend, over a year, and change of our life, pursuing an incredible story that we loved and were very passionate about, to get accepted into Sundance and have that, like, at every turn, we were just like, hey, we're happy with what we got at the moment. And this is a tremendous wish list of any filmmaker to be at these, particular junctures in our career. And of course, to be nominated is just is a tremendous honor. To have 5 nominations for our series really, I don't think put into words how appreciative we are to, those who have watched it, who've been fans of the show, who followed our companion podcast of the series, and then to have industry professionals who, we respect and collaborate with as well, offer, their support and put us to, get us to this point. So, hopefully this, is the beginning of a new trend for the next project and projects that we have coming up. But ultimately, super grateful.
I do want to talk about projects you have coming up, but before we get there, so obviously I'm particularly interested in this idea that you did a companion podcast for this series. James, was that your idea?
Yeah, totally mine. Nobody else. And actually, that was another collaborative thing. I mean, it was something that we discussed with Archie Gips from Unrealistic Ideas, and even talking to like HBO, because there were so many interesting things about this story that hit the cutting room floor, and we wanted every little story to be in there, but if it's not necessarily relevant to the spine of the story, and it could have been 12 episodes, but that might have been milking it a little bit. So we always had this idea, and pretty early on, we had talked about doing a podcast, brought it up to HBO, and then coincidentally, after we had some discussions with HBO about it, then the Chernobyl podcast had come out. And Brian and I are both huge fans of that show. Both love Craig Mazin, and so we're like, look, it works. Like, this is a very interesting thing that's adding value. It's adding to the overall story. And so then they agreed, and we went forward and did it. And it was we really had a great time. It's cool because, as you know, with a podcast, you can turn that around pretty fast. Whereas with a documentary TV series, it took us years to make. So it's nice to be able to create some art in the span of a week.
I think they're at the different ends of the spectrum here. But I will say you do an excellent job. I've only had a chance to listen to the first one, but who wants to maybe you can tell us a little bit more about each, because each episode of the podcast tracks. It goes with one of the episodes of the show, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's really truly designed to be a companion to listen to after you've actually watched that episode. So if you want that little refresher break in between each episode, if you're not binging them back to back now, they're great buffers. Or you can binge the podcast after you watch and binge the series. But yeah, each episode we have a new guest. Usually it's always been a subject of our show. And so the first episode we had Chris Graham. The second episode it was Robin Colombo. The third episode,
Gloria
Brown. The fourth we had
George Chandler. Fifth was AJ. That's a good. Yeah, they're all great.
And
then the last one was Mark Devereaux.
Yeah,
the federal prosecutor.
Okay, excellent.
And so one of the things that we were really excited about, not only talking about things that we experienced while making it and discoveries that weren't included within the body of the series, but we actually play the audio of deleted scenes that never made the actual series. And that's, some of those are really fun and great. And I'm trying to think, I think did we play the one with Doug? There was another undercover operation that we didn't feature in the show that Doug talks about and was absolutely hilarious. And
I don't think we did that one.
You didn't include that?
It could be a bonus episode.
There we go. Yeah. We actually did do a bonus episode. I forgot. Yeah, we did do a bonus.
Oh yeah, we did do a bonus episode. That was it was more of it was hosted by Tom Segura, stand-up comedian and podcaster extraordinaire.
Right.
And he basically interviewed us about what it was like to make the entire show.
Oh wow. So kind of like this. except probably much funnier and better produced. But no, I think it's a great. I mean, do you think this is something that's going to be pretty standard with series? These, it's almost like when DVDs came out and you had all the director's cut or whatever and voiceovers, which I guess worked and didn't work in certain ways. But I mean, for listeners, I highly recommend it. I found it on YouTube. I gather it's on all the different platforms. Yeah. The cut scenes, I like the you find out where the idea for Shamrock Productions came from. You have all kinds of interesting things. I like the asking the subjects how they now think of it now that everything's in the can and now it's been produced, how they feel like it comes across and things. I think it is a great companion piece, and much pithier and well put together than this podcast at only 30 minutes or so. So something we're going to aim for in the future. But you mentioned it just before I segued, or not segued, but we went down that tangent a bit. But what is next for you two? If I've read through Hollywood media and stuff, there's supposedly other things in the work. So maybe you can give our listeners a little taste of what's to come.
Well, there's.
What can you say?
Yeah, what we can say is that we're working on a new series, and
just through our company. Yeah.
It's through our company, Fun Meter, which it's Fun Meter is named after Doug Matthews' favorite saying that he liked to tag the fun meter. So we figured, our first project together, it's a nice little callback, and it also shows the viewpoint that we have on things. We usually, and this was part of the hard selling point for HBO, was when we were like, okay, we're going to do a true crime documentary series, and it's going to be funny. And they just couldn't wrap their heads around that fully, because normally true crime docs are about someone being wrongfully accused and jailed for 20 years, or a mass murder, or something eerie and weird. And like it's not going to be like that. So we have that general viewpoint on projects, but we are working on a new series that is in a lot of ways more quirky and weirder and interesting, and has a larger swing of comedic to tragic tone than we did with McMillions. Can't say exactly what it is yet, but it's going to be very exciting.
Okay, well, we definitely look forward to it. I mean, I think the tagline on Fun Meter's site says "Stranger than fiction, scripted and non-scripted content." I mean, what's drawn you to this idea of sort of this? It's more than a niche, but this idea of, I mean, because I personally think that truth is often more stranger than fiction, as we all know. But what's drawn you in this direction?
I mean, I think that, our taste for humorous, like finding humor in the most obscure places, and dark comedies are, still at the root of, some of our favorite movies and TV shows. So we just, we love docs and documentaries. We don't see it too often in this genre. And, there's some great docs that are very tragic, or some great docs that are needle pushing an issue and really important to get out there. And true crime is fascinating. It's definitely like, it's been, having its heyday now for a good long while. And just people are invested in these, like in the details of how people pull off, these intricate crimes. But the fun factor, or this, the quirky factor, I think it appeals to us on a lot of levels. We love comedy, and, why not explore this space and discover, tones in the documentary genre that, haven't really been explored in full. I mean, not to say that people haven't done it before, but it's certainly something that attracts us. And, I can't think of anything else, James, that, right?
Well,
I mean,
the thing that we like is that like McMillions, for example, it could be done in a way where you're making fun of the people in it. But we never wanted to do that. We want funny characters to be funny, but life can in an instant be funny and then tragic in the next moment. And so we're really drawn to stories like that have a certain weird quirkiness to them with interesting characters, but also have a very serious undertone to them. Like there are morals to the story of McMillions, just like any other of the stories that Brian and I are diving into. It's not all fluff. There are actual very real things within it, but you can also laugh within that seriousness.
Okay. And I think, I mean, in James, as you're sort of alluding to, is this a tough sell? I mean, when you're going around, I mean, as you said, you're fortunate to have had HBO and Mark Wahlberg's company, you know, support you in all this. But pitching these types of stories, is that a tough one when you go into that boardroom and try to pitch that story?
Well, it was until McMillions came out.
Yeah.
That's quite a helpful calling card of saying this story has these aspects to it, but take a look at McMillions. You understand the type of tone, and it's going to have something within that ballpark. So that has actually been helpful. And Brian and myself, we are very we don't like to leave anything to chance. So when we're pitching something, we're coming with a pretty detailed, thought out, written breakdown of the entire show. And then we're also having a visual sizzle reel or something that really shows how interesting the story can be and the kind of tone that we're going for.
It's hard to believe, but we're actually coming to the end of our time together. So it's been a whirlwind tour of McMillions and Fun Meter and the things that you're doing. I hope it's been a whirlwind tour for you. I mean, you kind of already alluded to it in going back to McMillions. So both of you, what lessons have you drawn? Not so much, I mean, what are the lessons you've drawn from doing this as filmmakers, and what do you hope the series legacy will be?
You know, I think that a good story is a good story. And, you know, if you actually invest the time and the effort to really find out how far and how deep a story goes, McMillions, you know, even though it's 6 hours, like we didn't talk to every single person who was indicted. You know, there's so many other veins, you know, to this that, you know, we could have kept going down and going down and going down. And, you know, I think that, you know, you always learn on every single project. Like there's not, you know, and you take that knowledge to the next, to the next, to the next, and you just keep building from it. I think there's so many things, like not only in terms of my collaboration with James and how we work together, how we, you know, started and built our, you know, our company, the things that we want to work on in the future, but, you know, just, you know, I think we really appreciated the tone of McMillions. And as James was saying earlier, like that we like things to be funny, but never to make fun of anyone. And it's very easy, you know, to do that if you've got some wacky, kooky character to just like, you know, exploit that aspect of their personality. And so, you know, there is a certain angle in which we want to approach, you know, quirky characters. But, you know, I think at the root of this, you know, the legacy for McMillions is just, you know, hopefully it's a well-told story. It illustrates our, you know, cinematic approach, our ability to look at things, you know, almost like a scripted series would be approached, or a scripted movie, but, you know, has the heart of the documentary and is, you know, revealing in its information in a way that is compelling and makes you laugh and makes you cry and makes you think about it after the fact. Like if you can achieve all of those things in a project, you know, I feel like you succeed in this medium, and hopefully we can continue to do that in future projects.
And James, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, the biggest lesson to me out of all of this was to not play it safe, and
Mm.
everything from how I first dove into the story, all the way to us having the most recreations in something HBO's ever done, to doing a large, well, now there's a much larger series with the Vow, but we were the largest series that they had done, and just in a lot of aspects of, there are ways where we could have played it safe, but we really fought for what we believed in and how this should be, and ultimately, even if it wasn't exactly what we had originally planned, we did push things a little bit further than they normally would have, and it worked. And then, the other side of that is, like, I'm just very appreciative to Brian for the partnership, and to Mark Wahlberg and Stephen Levinson and Archie Gips and Lisa and Nancy and everybody at HBO, the amount that they put behind it. Just the legacy of this entire thing is that we talked about this a lot throughout it, and this was a big selling point, or not even a selling point, but this is when we had talked about, like, the serious undertones of the show is, this is a big lesson, and sometimes good people just make bad decisions. Like, most of the people involved in this that became federal criminals, they weren't career criminals. They weren't these like criminal masterminds or anything like that. They were just regular people who, sometimes things are too good to be true, and if you're down on your luck, you're willing to turn a blind eye to that. And so that was a big lesson that we wanted to show, is that life isn't necessarily just one way or the other. There's a large gray area where you can live, and then sometimes it can lead to a documentary being made about your life. Hopefully that doesn't happen to all of us, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point, and I just want to thank you for making this. If anyone had been at home when I was watching these episodes, they would have wondered why I was laughing my head off at times, and why I had a smile on my face. And so I'm looking forward to binge watching the last couple of episodes that I hadn't gotten around to yet. So thanks again. And I think we all look forward to your next project. If it's anything like this one, I know it will be another hit. And just to remind, so thank you, basically. Thank you, James Hernandez and Brian Lazarte, the directors and exec producers extraordinaire of McMillions. You can still stream it on HBO and Sky Docs here in the UK. I highly recommend it. And just to say a big shout out to This is Distorted Studios here in Leeds, England. And to a big thanks to our listeners. You're the reason we do this. And please remember to like us and share us with your friends and family wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. This is Factual America, signing off.
You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is alamopictures.co.uk.